technically 10 years before Amtrak and 10 years after, but I don't know that I was old enough to have 10 years before Amtrak, so you'll have to imagine that. All right, and here I am. Oops, now I'm not seeing. All right, I'm seeing the page. All right, that's me. That's on the Illinois Central office car number 1. If you remember that back when Amtrak started, they insisted that every office car be painted in Amtrak colors to match all the cars they were repainting. And some railroads said, "Oh, go fish," and the IC always played by the rules, so they repainted the number 1 in the appropriate colors. And I think I was on a trip with my boss down to Hammond, Louisiana, or something like that. And that just shows, whoops, the railroads I worked for. The first railroad was the Long Island Railroad. I sold tickets one summer and worked in the information booth on the phone and at Penn Station. I was a tower operator for the EJ&E. I worked for the IC mostly in planning, though 1 year in operations. Amtrak for 20 years until I got Tom Downs disease. And I was mostly in marketing there, finishing up as the director of route marketing. And then finally, after I left Amtrak, I worked for Mark as chief transportation officer. So that was sort of the history there. And here we go, 10 years before and after 1971. And there's sort of a timeline from 60 to 68. I was raised in New York, and you'll see pictures from New York. I worked for the Long Island one summer when I was in college, and I went to undergraduate NYU in the Bronx, which is no longer NYU, is now Bronx Community. And then I went to Evanston, where I went to grad school at Northwestern and worked summer job at the EJ&E, and then worked 5 years for the Illinois Central. And then finally, during at least this period, 75 to 80, and I was back in Maryland and working for Amtrak. I actually worked for Amtrak from 75 to 95. Really, when I think about it, there's nothing marked in here. All right, we start off, where I'm sure you all recognize that's the old Penn Station, probably around 1964. I wish I had more pictures. I also wish I could go back with a digital camera. When you're using ASA 25 film or ASA 64, you had limitations, and fortunately there was plenty of light in the concourse area. But at one time when the station opened, you wouldn't see that the bookstore and the newspaper stand, all that stuff was on the arcade down from 7th Avenue. And gradually, the Pennsy moved more and more of the commercial stuff down to the concourse, because that's where most of the people were. And I used to spend a lot of time at Penn Station. I started going to New York. My parents let me go in when I was 13 years old. And all the years wandering around Penn Station and Grand Central, I don't think I ever had anyone question why I was there or what I was doing there. In addition to taking pictures, I used to go on the dining car, and ask for menus and stuff like that. And there's either the tower or the mountain view. I'm not sure which one. I'm not sure about that orange stripe on the left. Maybe that was New Haven train. But between the east-west trains, the New York Washington and New York Boston trains, and the Florida trains, there was a lot of action in the afternoon on Penn Station, much more so than Grand Central. And typical sort of Pennsy conductor, this is always at the bottom of the stairs and with the direction to your car. And it was a pretty good sized train, as you can see. They had 9 sleepers, twin unit diner, an RPO. One of those cars was the tower about in view because it had the master room in it. Nope. All right. And the Pennsy, the last ads they did for the Broadway were these 4 ads with the cartoons, which I thought were great ads. Unfortunately, they didn't reverse the trend, but the Broadway Limited in Chicago isn't a wing jet, a jump jet, a speed jet, or a jet jet. It's called a train. Last time you took it, you probably called it a choo-choo train. And it's great ads. This is at Elizabeth, the big S curve, which doesn't look quite that way now. I think there's at least 1 parking garage in the back, and this whole area to the left is all buildings now. But you can see there was a siding in there. You can see the track in the lower left-hand corner. You walk down there. That was probably half a mile south of Elizabeth. Never had a problem in all the years there. I suspect that might be the Manhattan Limited. I'm just guessing because of the time of day and all those X-29 boxcars. And then it looked like a couple of P-85 long distance coaches. But regardless, there were a lot of trains there.
Ira, back to 1960, maybe, were there any trains you saw with the drum heads still in use on the last car?
Well, the Broadway had if you call that a drum head, it said Broadway Limited. I don't know if it. Oh yeah, I think there'll be one here. Certainly the Seaboard trains had drum heads.
Okay.
I think there's a picture in here. I hope so. I know I have a picture. I hope I didn't edit it out. This is at the Elizabeth Station, a southbound train. And I'm missing what a great picture. Well, anyway, I went over these and I still didn't remember that there was one other picture I should have there, but I don't. Anyway, this is Harrisburg. This was my first trip to Chicago in 1963 and nearly got left behind because I walked around this side of the train to take a picture. And when I started to walk back, all the doors were closed. And fortunately, one was open and I got on. And obviously, they had just finished changing engines from a GG1 to the 2. Well, one's an E7, and the last E7 is at the Railroad Museum in Strasbourg. And I guess that's an E8, the other one. Here's Horseshoe Curve, an eastbound train in the afternoon. Doesn't look like it had any sleepers or whatever. It could be the Juniata, I'm not sure. We're in Chicago now, and that's the eastbound. It's actually the Penn Central Broadway, although it looks largely Pennsylvania. The track coming at us in the foreground is the connection that was built between the Pennsy and the New York Central there in Whiting, so that they could operate all the trains, passenger trains down on the former Pennsy and then get back on the Central. And I think they abandoned eventually the Central tracks and just left the Pennsy ones. Now, at the present time, everything goes up that connection, and there may be another track because I think the Pennsy through Gary has been abandoned where that train is. And this is the Penn Central Broadway, although it looks a heck of a lot like the Pennsy. You can tell it's Penn Central because if you look at the coaches in the back, you see the New York Central car, and then at least one, probably a sleeper painted in that Penn Central line green. And on the left is a Burlington commuter train. We switched over to the New York Central. This is Harmon. I think it's a westbound train, the North Shore. On the right, you can see those are the shops of the New York Central at Harmon. They call it Croton Harmon now. I can't bring myself to do that. Croton was a station, the next station north. But as I said, not as many trains. You had this train westbound at like 1 o'clock out of New York, And then the next train on the Central wasn't until 4:40, which was the Hendrick Hudson to Albany, followed by the Century. This is at, you'll excuse the graininess, but this is at Mott Haven Yard, which was located in the Bronx. All the trains, the long distance trains, they were pulled out by one of the switchers. They came up, they went around the Y and up the Hudson line to the car washer in, I can't remember the name of the location, but anyway, they went through the washer and then they were pulled down around the Y and into Harmon. And then when the train was ready to leave, another switcher would come, get on the rear and take it down to Grand Central. This was eventually, they built apartments and other things above the yard. But this was where all the servicing was done. This was where the commissary was. I went to the commissary one day and for $3 I got a huge box of New York Central china. That wasn't worth much then, I guess. I hate to think how much that would be worth today. I'll have one or two pieces of it left. And then here, the Century pulling out. Obviously, this is after they got rid of the Commodore Vanderbilt and added the coaches, the 2 slumber coaches, although I've seen the train with as many as 3. And on the far right is a diner for the coach passengers and the slumber coaches. They didn't want them mingling, I guess, with the sleeping car passenger, which would be up at the rear, would be at the rear of the train. This is at Roa Hook, which is just north of Peekskill. The mountain that's sort of on the left is the Bear Mountain, and train will go north and then swing around up the Hudson narrows way down. The mountains come very close to the river or squeeze the river down. There, that's probably the North Shore again, is my bet. All right. This is at University Heights, which was the stop on the Hudson line, which is nearest to where I went to school. And that in the background, you could see from my dorm room was an old coal-fired power plant. I'm not sure if it was still active then or not, but anyway, we'll take a look here. That's the Empire State Express. The observation on the rear wasn't going to Cleveland or Buffalo. That actually went to Montreal on the Laurentian and was taken off at Albany. Let's see, we'll give you another shot at it since it goes by quick. RPO. Of course, that was with the spring wound 8mm camera, so you can only go so far. All right. Oops, I don't want to do that, do we? All right. All right, now here it is. It's 20th Century Limited with the RPO, 2 coaches up front, 2 slumbers. I don't know what that, there should have been a diner there, but anyway, there's a sleeping car section. And there's the Hickory Creek, or the other creek, I forget. Sandy Creek, maybe. No, I'm not sure.
Ira, at Harmon in 1960, if you were there, was there any steam infrastructure still standing? Do you remember?
No. The 64, actually. Well, it probably was even later than that. Might have been 65. I think steam in that area had been long gone. We'll do it again. Or maybe that's the diner. No, I don't quite know what's going on here, but anyway. All right. We're moved from the Pennsy and Penn Central and Pennsy and New York Central to the Penn Central. I mean, this is the early Metroliners. You can see they still got that red Pennsy striping on the side, but the keystone has been replaced. And this is at Washington Union Station. This is it's interesting. You had two, you see Metro Club 1 and 2. It was not usual to have two Metro Clubs on a 4-car train, but they did for some reason on this day. And I remember the early uniforms were that yellow with the epaulets. And the worst side of Penn Central, this is somewhere out around Wanata, Indiana. That's probably the Fort Pitt. What's not interesting is the condition of that locomotive, but it's still a pretty good sized train. And the Penn, if you look at a Penn Central timetable, the Pennsy trains kept their names, and the New York Central trains were all just numbers. This is at Porter. This is a Detroit-Chicago train coming off the Detroit line and coming on to the New York Central to head for Chicago. There's no picture. This is at Englewood. That's probably a Detroit train, is my guess, and a freight waiting for it. I think they're on the Pennsy tracks at Englewood. I'm pretty sure they are, especially given that red platform sign. And right now, of course, that interlocking signal in the back protected the crossing with the Rock Island, which came down from LaSalle Street Station. Well, that's gone now because they built the jump over there to separate the Metro commuter trains from the Amtrak and Norfolk Southern freights.
So these are westbound, looks like in Englewood.
No, I think these are eastbound, actually.
Oh, okay.
Because the crossing is back here. No, they're eastbound trains, I'm pretty certain. And this is sort of the remains of the Century. Not a bad looking train. It had a leg that went Chicago, Detroit to Buffalo, where they added that. I think at Albany, they took the Boston leg off. I'm trying to remember, it seems like there should have been another leg, but I think they eliminated the train to St. Louis. And I'm not sure if that had a Cincinnati leg. It still had the twin unit diner, and it still had a slumber coach, which the Broadway did not. And the slumber coach actually is, I believe, that second passenger car. And this is on the, this is before they had built the connection at Whiting. The two tracks in the foreground are the Pennsy, and the two tracks that the train is on, that's the Central. Though it's a good question as to why there's position light signals up there.
How fast would this train be going when you shot it?
Oh, 30 miles an hour. So it's just about to go over the Calumet River drawbridge. Actually, relatively. All right, we've left Penn Central and we're on to New Haven. We're at Cos Cob. There's a lot of interesting things about this picture. Number one on the right, you see an Erie Lackawanna and a Pennsy hopper. Those have coal in there for the Cos Cob power plant, which was built, I think, in 1905 or so. And the New Haven wanted to get rid of it desperately. That's one of the reasons they bought the FL9s. But it hung on much longer than that. It is now gone. And there's a park there with some nice displays on the railroad. But the power is now all commercial power. You can see the unique New Haven triangular catenary. And it's maybe not as obvious, but this is a drawbridge. And when the drawbridge went up, well, the place where the drawbridge went up, the wire went much higher than it would normally be. And they would lower the pantograph and they would coast through that area, but the wire was high enough. The train wasn't getting any power because it wasn't touching the wire, but the wire was high enough they could raise the drawbridge and not hit the wire. So that was how they dealt with the opening the bridge underneath the under the catenary. AP5.
That bridge was hinged on one end, right?
Right, it was a bascule bridge, it's called. This is at Oak Point, which is right ahead of us. This train will be going up onto the Hellgate Bridge. On the right is Oak Point Yard, about a mile or two up, well, looking the other direction from the train coming, that's New Rochelle, which is the extent of the Amtrak track ownership. The cars are on what I believe was originally the New York, Boston, and Westchester and Boston right away, which had been long gone, had been gone since the mid 1930s. And this is one of the Boston to Washington trains coming down off of New Haven, heading for Penn Station. And here are the FL9s. This is at Woodlawn. Train still on on the New York Central, coming up from Grand Central. It's operating theoretically, at least, off of the third rail. The FL9s were designed to operate off third rail on the New York Central and on diesel beyond there. Now, in later days, when the engines were getting long in the tooth or whatever, they often would operate on diesel all the way down to Grand Central, smoking everything up. But that wasn't the official word. That's funny, the rail fans hated it. Well, I probably hated these because they replaced everything but the EP5s, but they are now become sort of real treasures. And as a matter of fact, I see the Cape Cod and Hyannis it has a couple FL9s and repainted at least one of them this winter, so it looks very sharp.
Yeah, it hasn't been Cape Cod and Hyannis since the 80s.
What is it? Like Cape Cod Central? Whatever it is.
Yeah, it's Cape Cod Central.
Right. But they still repainted the engine.
Yeah, they're working on one now. The other one hasn't been painted yet.
Yeah.
The last I saw, the one of them, I don't remember which number it was, but is in the gray primer.
Yeah. Well, I saw one that supposedly been repainted. But in any event, if you want to see a FL9 in New Haven colors, that's certainly one place that it operates. We're at Griffith. That's the tower on the right. The tower is still there, but it's been moved across the tracks to a museum. A great place to watch trains because this train's obviously on the former Erie. The switch in the foreground is where, well, that's actually the end of the crossover. And then just beyond that, the C&O of Indiana takes off, and that's how the C&O freight trains got into Hammond. In back, you've got the EJ&E crossing the Erie, and you have New York Central Joliet branch there, and you also have the Grand Trunk Western, and they've done some shuffling of tracks now because both the Grand Trunk and the EJ&E are owned by the Canadian National. But that's the Lake Cities. The diner and the sleeper were added at different points, as we'll cover later. But right now, I don't know why they had a baggage on the front and the rear, but they did. This is the next to last westbound Lake Cities at Youngstown. I was riding the train, and at that point, for a long time, they had taken the sleeper off. The sleeper only ran overnight New York to Youngstown. The diner at this point came off at Marion. At one time, it went to Huntington, Indiana. But this equipment will turn around and become the last eastbound Lake Cities. Oops. And here's the switcher taking off the Tunkhannock, which is the sleeper from New York to Youngstown. This is Marion. AC Tower is still there, but not as a tower. I think it's a railroad museum. And I see somebody else taking a picture, at least there. Again, the next to last westbound train. And if you look real close in the back, you can see the switcher grabbing a hold of the diner. And of course, you have the C&O and the Norfolk and Western cross the Erie. And I should say that the Erie track is also was joint track with the New York Central. Don't have many D&H pictures, unfortunately, but this is 1964, my first trip to Canada. And we're crossing, that's Laurentian. You can see the RS units up front. The first bridge, the drawbridges, are the ones over the St. Lawrence Seaway. And in the back, you can see the original CP bridges, which are over the St. Lawrence River itself. This is Pullman Junction in Chicago. There's the westbound Capitol arriving in the morning. So I did get up in the, I don't know how I got down there that early, but I did. Must have been a weekend. And here's Grand Central Terminal, or not Grand Central, Grand Central Station, excuse me. The Capitol, you got a heavyweight coach on the rear. You've got one of the B&O Dome coaches up the third car. Oops. And here's the Capitol at Grand Central. You can see the tower, which of course is gone now. Unfortunately, the whole station's gone. And a popular view from, I'm sure, Roosevelt Road of the Capitol leaving. This is not the B&O, although it says B&O. This is actually the Newport News section of the George Washington at Lee Hall. Lee Hall, Virginia was the closest stop to Fort Eustis, where I was. It was still an open station. You can see the train order office, even though I think this railroad had CTC. That's kind of a mystery, but not far from the end of the line at Newport News.
Were you at Fort Eustis when they were still training using steam?
Yeah. I was probably one of the last groups to have PT and listen to a steam engine blowing his whistle.
All right.
I even have a couple of pictures, which I didn't put in this. I didn't think quite did, but yeah, the front gate and back was the nickname for the railroad, and they still had several steam engines running. And matter of fact, I have pictures of they ran a fan trip. I guess it came down on the C&O, and then they ran a trip around on the railroad. But this is January 1st, 1971. Amtrak is on the horizon. This is the Pocahontas coming in from Cincinnati into Roanoke. And what's kind of amazing about this train is if you look at it, it's got like 4 baggage cars, which clearly wasn't baggage. It was clearly some kind of storage mail and stuff. The RPOs were all gone by then. But somehow they kept enough mail to warrant that many head end cars. Here's the same train. Sun came out, and we're east of Roanoke, and It's the Blue Ridge Mountains there. And here's the whole train. You can see the former, I guess it's the Wabash coach. The N&W made a deal with the ICC. They let them discontinue the Powhatan Arrow, which was the day train, in exchange for putting a dome on the Pocahontas. And if you rode in the sleeper, you could use a coach ticket plus the accommodation charge instead of having to do the first class thing. And I used to, when I was at Chicago, sometimes that I take the Penn Central train down to Cincinnati, wait several hours in Cincinnati Union Terminal, then take this train to Roanoke. And at Roanoke, you get the train coming up from, I'm not sure where it started. It was the remains of the Birmingham Special, but it didn't come from Birmingham. And you have people changing back and forth, and that train would go to Lynchburg and then on up to Washington, where I get on Penn Central. But it's a handsome little train, and the mountains are obviously the Blue Ridge. Yep. And here's the transfer at Roanoke. That's interesting. That other car in the previous one looked like it was all stainless steel, but this one looks like it has some blue striping on it. So I don't, this is obviously a different day. There's no snow there. And the left is the Birmingham Special. On the right is the power for the Lynchburg, for the Pocahontas. On the red brick building all the way on the right is office building for the shops, which in the past year have been shut down and they're vacant. Signage is all gone. They look in good shape, but they're totally unused. Roanoke has taken a real beating from the NS merger. We're up in Richmond, and that's the Silver Star right around AY Tower. I'm sure you're familiar that the main Broad Street Station, all the trains went through in the same direction. They all went through sort of facing south and then coming around. And the tracks were set up so that if you were coming south, you headed right in the station, went around, and there was a wide point you properly. And the northbound trains would do just the reverse of that. They would head in on the Y, come around, and then continue out to the north. And there it is. Train, they've changed power to the RF&P, so that is looking south. It's now a science museum, I believe. This is Quantico. That's the original bridge. You know, they built a single track bridge and then they built a double track bridge. So now there are 3 tracks there. We're headed, again, that's probably the Silver Star, headed south, and Quantico Station is just behind us. The South Wind, Atlantic Coastline units ran through from Chicago to Florida, at least when I saw it, and I happened to be riding this train. We did not change to those Louisville, Nashville units. I'm not sure what train they were for. That big red brick building, I believe, is was the L&N office building. And you can see just a little bit of the L&N station back there. Someone asked about the drumhead. Well, there's the drumhead. I thought I had one. I have one up in Elizabeth, but that's in Hollywood, and that's the southbound Meteor. Here's the original auto train on the RF&P. And here we are again, we're down at Callahan, Florida. It's the auto train overtaking a Seaboard Coastline intermodal train at Callahan, looking south. And this is also where the Seaboard came down from Savannah. It ran close to the coast. And then I believe at Callahan, it crossed the coastline and went over to Baldwin. And in fact, during the winter months, the Silver Star did not stop at Jacksonville because they wanted it fast to schedule during the winter period. We're back in Chicago. Union Station, at least, well, as it all was, the part in the foreground, the concourse, unfortunately was torn down and is now an office building. You can see the four operators, the Pennsy and the Burlington owned the station, the GM&O and Milwaukee were tenants. And you can see, even though it was not a Santa Fe station, Fred Harvey operated the restaurants and shops. GM&O Joliet commuter train, looking for the GM&O, remarkably clean. And at basically the same location, coming out of Dearborn Station is, I believe, the Danville Flyer. As you see, it's an L&N train, which they took over the C&I. And the last passenger train on the former C&I was the Danville Flyer, which is, up in the morning, down at night. This is also at Dearborn Station, but that is the city of Decatur, which was, what was left of the Bluebird and those trains. Interestingly, the second car, although it's yellow, you can see it's labeled Wabash. That was probably a car that used to operate on the city of St. Louis, which was a Wabash train to Kansas City and then a UP train. Now we're out west of west of Chicago on the Milwaukee Road main line to Omaha. I used to know the name of the town. I can't remember. It doesn't look like this anymore. There's no more cornfields. What's kind of interesting about the train is if you look up on the nose above the headlight, the bell is there. Why? I've never been able to get a good story as to what the reason for that was. I've never seen another engine with it, and the Milwaukee Road can't tell me. But it was just sort of dumb luck.
And that's a bronze bell too, by gosh.
I guess. And here's we're starting to see the rest of the train. Still quite a bit of head-end business on this one as well. You can see there's two SP sleepers. And then one of these cars is the Dome, I believe the second car is the Dome Diner. The first one is the Dome Lounge. And in the back, you can see the Dome Coach. This was the city of Los Angeles, city of San Francisco, and city of Portland. At this time, of course, until SP built those dome cars, they would not let them run a conventional dome on the SP. This is again the city of everywhere coming east out of Savannah. In the background is the Mississippi River Valley, and they're about to go up Savannah Hill. And it's again a pretty good sized train. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Well, it's got to be close to 20 cars on that train. And you'll see it again. Here he is going up the hill. And I believe this was, if not the last, the next to last city of everything, with one of the those F-45s that the Milwaukee bought for their trains, because their E units were, getting extremely aged. That's in Chicago. Again, this looks totally different now. For all I know, this is covered by buildings, whatever. This whole area north of the L is all filled with development. We're at Western Avenue, and this train is backing in from the coach yard, which is located right behind us. And on the right is the Northwestern coach yard and the Northwestern main line into Chicago. And just ahead, they cross each other at a still operable interlocking. They periodically talk about building a jump over there, but they never have done it. Maybe it costs too much money. I don't know. There's no freight trains involved, but it can be a real bottleneck. And this is probably not the same train, obviously, but maybe the inbound morning Hiawatha from Minneapolis. They always sort of ran it that with the big dome, then the diner, and then the beaver tail on the rear. If you get a chance, the Friends of the 261 has the Cedar Rapids, and about 3 times a year they do a round trip from St. Paul to Chicago. You can ride one way, and it's just a fantastic car. All the glass there, and it's got the individual rotating parlor car seats. It's just a wonderful ride. And here's maybe the afternoon Hiawatha. And again, you can see at the back, the big dome and the diner and the whatever, that's, and the beaver tail. That bridge overhead is the Northwestern, we're a Technique, and that's how the Northwestern freight trains in Milwaukee go. They come up out of Proviso and they swing to the west side of O'Hare, and then they swing back to the east. They cross the Milwaukee, and you can see the abutment or the embankment to the left. The Milwaukee trains get on that same line, and right here at Technique, there's a ramp that they come down off of the Northwestern, and they get on the Milwaukee Road. Occasionally, the Milwaukee Road trains go down through Glenview or whatever, but most of them went this way, bypassing the congestion down in Chicago. We're in West Chicago, which is one of the places that I was a tower operator that summer. And that's the remains of the Kate Shelley 400. I assume everyone knows who Kate Shelley was. She was famous. Her father worked for the railroad, and the bridge washed out, or a lot of it, and she crawled across the bridge to get to the other side and flag down an oncoming passenger train. And I think it went, I'm not sure where the destination was, but this only maybe went to DeKalb or someplace like that. But anyway, that's it. The Northwestern was in hard shape at that time. The track in the foreground is the EJ&E line to Waukegan. Now the EJ&E line, now the CN line to Waukegan. A lot more trains now because they use that to bypass downtown Chicago. This is the Northwestern Milwaukee station. The lake is just on the right. This is one of those bi-level long distance trains from Green Bay or Ishpeming or whatever. I don't know which one it is right now. This station was torn down, as was the Milwaukee Road station, and a new station was built. It's unfortunate they both were, unique, old but unique. We're back in Chicago, and actually, if you look at that E unit and you look at the building that's right behind it, I probably worked in there when I worked for the IC for 5 years. Well, I didn't work for 5 years there because we moved up to Illinois Center, which was up around Randolph Street. But early on, that's where I worked. And I can't tell what train that is. This is kind of a nice potpourri. In the back, by the Phillips 66 sign, you can see the Soldier Field where the Bears play right now, and would rather not. The switch engine is spotting the Panama Limited for 5 p.m. departure. The cars on the left, the stainless steel cars, are the James Whitcomb Riley, because it operated over the IC to Kankakee. the C&O car should have been over there. I'm not quite sure. If it's only, well, I don't know why it's not there, but because they ran a through sleeper from Chicago to Newport News, which went on the Riley, and then was put on the it wasn't the George Washington, it was probably the Sportsman or something like that. Here's the Panama Limited heading down the 8-track right away. You had 4. This is north of Kensington. You had 4 commuter district tracks, 2 passenger and 2 freight. All 4 passenger commuter tracks, I see electric tracks are still there, but there's only 2 inner cities, so to speak, tracks. I don't think there's probably nearly as much freight there as there once was. But anyway, he's coming down, head for New Orleans. And this is the city of Miami, down south of Homewood, somewhere between Homewood, Kankakee. He's got, you can see that dome, that's an NP dome sleeper, which the IC leased every winter. And the unbelievable thing about it is they not only leased it, they insisted that it be painted in IC colors. They weren't going to do anything to disturb the look. Now you'll say, I see other cars. Well, partially this wasn't their car. This was a Seaboard. I think it's a sleeper. It's a former C&O sleeper, and they, Seaboard wasn't going to repaint it, but their trains were pretty spiffy. This is the, I'm not sure if I'm going to say the Hawkeye or the Black Hawk. I think this was the overnight train to Sioux City, out in the western suburbs, not too far west, still in the city of Chicago. And here is another IC train. Unbeknownst to me, I used to say it was the Panama Limited, but there's too many coaches on that. It does have a diner and it does have 2 sleepers, but that's too many coaches for the Panama. The Panama might have had 3 or 4 at the most. But I don't know, does anybody want to see it again, or should I keep going? Well, we'll give you, it doesn't take long. This is probably 59th Street, right near the Science and Industry. Okay, no, sorry about that. It's napkins from the Traveler's Rest car on the North Coast Limited. I would imagine most of you are familiar with it. It's got all the drawings from the Lewis and Clark maps and things on the wall. It's named Traveler's Rest because that was where they spent their first winter on their trip to the West Coast. And here's the combined Empire Builder, North Coast Limited, Twin Cities Zephyr sitting under the old post office, which I believe is offices or condos or something now, but they're looking actually back towards Union Station. I mean, the tracks came out from under the post office, and it was very convenient because at one time all the mail came down chutes and went right to the trains, but no more. And here we are at Aurora, and that's the inbound Empire Builder. The 2 coaches are in the original Omaha orange paint scheme, and the dome, I think, may be in the big sky blue. I'm not sure. I think the NP cars were on the back of the train. Here's the California Zephyr at Union Avenue. Union Avenue was the tower also. Just a little bit beyond, it swings to the north. You'll see a train there in the Amtrak section to Union Station. We're no more than a mile or 2 out of Union Station. And here's the Zephyr out on the triple track right away, headed for Chicago also. The interesting thing is he's running on the far left. I mean, all three tracks were CTC, so he could do that, but that you more likely expect him in the middle or over the track close to us. And then whoever I was with is clearly taking a picture there on the platform. And there he goes. It's obviously a winter train, only 2 coaches. And just not my picture, but I took it anyway and put it in. This is the original California Zephyr, somewhere obviously out on the Rio Grande. And I don't know, anybody have any comments? Notice what's unusual? This is at Congress Park, where the Q interchanged with the IHB. But anybody have any comments on what about that dome car?
I mean, it's not curved. Yeah.
Is
That's
that,
right.
is that
The
silver?
first dome, Silver Dome, the very first one out of the Burlington shops.
Yeah, it was after supposedly the story is that a VP of GM rode through Glenwood Canyon in the cab, and he said, boy, this is great. The passengers could only see it. And I guess he convinced the Burlington, and they did this, I think, at Burlington shops, and they didn't have any curved glass. You can see the glass is all straight, which actually was also used later on the Santa Fe cars. But unlike the later cars, it has no depressed center. I'm not quite sure how you got through, what the headroom was like, because when all the other Bud domes in the center was depressed, you went down a couple of steps and then you came up and you had that a little bit of extra clearance to walk through. This does not. There were 2 of these built, I think, and they were successful, so they went out and built the whole fleet of them.
Well, if you want to see it, it belongs to the Mad River and Nickel Plate Museum in Bellevue.
Okay, well, we'll send Alex out to get some pictures.
Yeah,
Interior pictures, please, Alex.
yeah,
I hope is it in good shape?
I believe it's undercover now.
Okay. Well, stainless steel cars, well, even stainless steel cars, if you don't take care of them, can look pretty ratty, as Amtrak has demonstrated. All right, and this is a historical picture. Again, we've got the combined Empire Builder, Twin Cities Zephyr, and North Coast Limited. This is on March 1st, 1970, I believe. This is the first Burlington Northern combined train coming out of Chicago at Cicero Yard. You can see, I think that one stainless steel dome up front is the extent of the Twin Cities Zephyr. And then you have the Great Northern cars in the big sky blue, and then the NP cars are in the back. And there you go, he's going away. We're at Dearborn Station, that's the International, International, yeah, or the Maple Leaf. Daytime Chicago-Toronto train. The CN efforts extended to the Grand Trunk. And I mean, you can see the train is spotless. I believe the car on the rear is probably a parlor cafe car. What else? I guess I'm not sure, there's a RPO in the back. I'm not sure if that's a Grand Trunk car. Oh, no, what is it? It almost says New York Central. I don't know what a New York Central RPO would be doing there, but maybe I'm misreading it. And same train out somewhere in Dyer or somewhere in the South Chicago suburbs. And here's Rock Island train. I suspect it's the Davenport, but I don't really know. It's unusually large for a Rock Island train, but it could have been on a weekend. It could have been a baseball train or something like that. But normally the train to like Peoria would be a couple of coaches and a diner and a baggage car. But that's it. And here we are at Dearborn Station. Train shed unfortunately is gone now, although the building is still there. I haven't seen the building as to what they've done, the interior. But this is the Texas chief, and the engineer and the conductor are conferring. Whoops. We're now, it's obviously the LCAP. That's the high-level LCAP lounge car. People must have been open the gates and they're boarding. And here's the combined LCAP super chief. And the only thing I always debated whether he's pulling out, but I think it's just train is just long enough. You can see the train shed down under Roosevelt Road, but his headlight isn't on. So my guess is the train was just long enough that he stuck that far out. Here is, I think, my only Santa Fe snow shot. That's the Texas chief leaving the at 16th Street, leaving Dearborn Station. And you can see the bridge from Union Station in the background. And a lot of these tracks are gone now. Of course, you had the Dearborn Station, you had the Santa Fe, and you had the Grand Trunk. Well, the Grand Trunk came around and on that curve. Let's see what else. You had the L&N came around. Of course, you had the Pennsy going across. The GM&O came off the bridge and went around a curve to the left. And a little history. This was when I was at Northwestern, and these were all non-rail fans. They wanted to take a ride on the Super Chief because I had told them about one of our trips. So we reserved, or we took 23, which was the all-coach train to the West Coast and to Streator, and we reserved a bedroom on the Super Chief coming east so we could eat in the first-class diner. And then we had lunch on the Super Chief, and then we went up into the Pleasure Dome, and that's me in the back a few years ago. This is very heavy study work to be done. And here's the car from the outside. In fact, Sharon and I rode on our honeymoon on the Super Chief. It was Amtrak by then, but we had a Santa Fe steward who, when he found we were on a honeymoon, made us a special dinner in the turquoise room. It was being used for regular passengers, but he did that for us, which was very nice. This is, I believe, at McCook. We're now back on the UP, Kimball, Nebraska, and here comes the city everywhere. This is not the city of everywhere. This is the what's left of the Portland Rose in Medicine Bow, Wyoming. And you see the station, and then on the right is the Virginian Hotel, or does it say motel? I'm not sure. But it takes its name from the first popular Western in the United States, which is called The Virginian. It was written by Owen Wister. And the famous line from that was when the hero says to the villain, "Smile when you call me that, mister." This is Sidney, Nebraska, and I've been told the station is torn down, which is too bad because that really is a classic building. There's the city of everywhere. Big train, even in the middle of the winter. And there's the same train. You can see an eastbound freight coming. You can see the headlight down there, and the car in the rear is a steam boiler car to, keep steam through the train. And this was well, they used this, was one of the paintings they had done for the Golden Spike. And this is what I consider the finest dining car ever built, the UP Dome diners. They were just fantastic. We took a trip on the day before the Golden Spike. It was the only day we could go, and we rode out and had dinner on the Dome Diner, and then walked across town and took the Twin Cities Zephyr back. And the amazing thing afterwards, many years afterwards, I looked at it, and we only had 18 minutes to go across town. And today I'd never consider doing that, but obviously didn't think twice about it then. And in fact, we were a few minutes early at Savannah. But this car even had two sugar bowls. You'll see them, they're sort of in the middle. One sugar bowl had granulated sugar in it, and not granulated sugar in packages, but granulated sugar like you might find in a restaurant. And then the other sugar bowl had sugar cubes in it, wrapped sugar cubes. And, it was one where you sit up there bouncing along across the Milwaukee Road track, watching the semaphores drop. And here we are at Savannah, my friend's wife. That's, I believe, one of the Dome lounges. And here she is. This is in the lower level, the Dome Lounge. That's the bar there. I thought that one of them had maybe the Dome. No, I thought Dome Lounge had a mural with one of the gas turbines in it, but maybe it's in the diner rather than in the lounge. And then one of my best pictures. This is near Rock Springs, Wyoming. Again, the city of everywhere and that's US 30, Lincoln Highway in the back. And fortunately, there was a road up to the top here. And what else can you say other than that's the Union Pacific across Wyoming? And we've reached 1971. There it is, that first map with the, something? It's interesting. That map shows the Rio Grande, not the UP. And it must have been, I have to check on this, when the map was printed, they originally wanted to go on the Rio Grande, and then the Rio Grande pulled out. But they obviously didn't have time to change the map. I never noticed that before. We need John Morris here. All right, here we are, Amtrak. This is at New Carrollton, and or is it? And it's not New Carrollton. I'm sorry, it's Greenbelt, because as you can see, there's two gauntlet tracks there. This was the original station. The New Carrollton station wasn't built yet, and I don't know if any of you remember the original Greenbelt station. To get to the platform, which was an island platform, you had to walk down this horrendous set of stairs. I don't think there was an elevator. I mean, it was just awful. And then you had to walk, you walked under the southbound track, and then you had to walk up the other one. And finally, they built the new station in the same place as the Metro. Here we have southbound Amtrak train on the two tracks between Perryville and Northeast, and you have the grates over the windows on the E60 to protect against stoning. Though it's interesting, this one doesn't have it, maybe slightly earlier. That I'm sure is the Silver Star. You tended to have the coaches for each section on the front and the back. It's probably the Miami on the front, then the sleepers and the diners in the middle, and then the Tampa cars on the rear. You'll never see a Florida train that long right now. What is that? 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Probably about 16 or 17 cars. And again, this is either the Star or it could be the Crescent, not sure. That's at the Bush River. And early Metroliners, but what's most interesting about this, you can see all the track machinery, all the work going on as part of the NISA program. But the far track, the one he's on, is all welded rail. And then the next track is all jointed rail. It's not horrendous, but at any kind of speed at all, it would be kind of rough. then welded rail on this side, and then finally jointed rail, which I think is what they're replacing, but that was absolutely awful. That was where the freight ran. And here's the original Metroliners, but on the Philadelphia Harrisburg trip in the suburban Philadelphia. Here's the 4935, which is inside the Strasbourg Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania, I should say, going across the bridge at Havre de Grace. And this is also the same bridge over the Susquehanna. I believe, given the length of that train, it probably is the Washington section of the Broadway Limited. And ditto, again, probably at the Bush River. And this is Aberdeen, whoops, this is Aberdeen. Before the overhead highway bridge was built, you can see how sharp a curve the railroad makes in the back. And they came around that curve at 80, 90 miles an hour, and you couldn't see them until they were top of you. I mean, obviously they had bells and whatever, but I've always been surprised that there weren't multiple accidents at that location. Whoops. And we're down at Union Station. There's K Tower, which I think is going to be torn down or taken out of service, and maybe they're going to use it for offices. But there's the ICE from Germany coming in on a test run. And here we are in Baltimore, and there's everybody's favorite, the X2000. I think most Amtrak people would have rather had that than anything else, but the government of Canada gave him some very good loans to Alstom to get the ICE built, but not the ICE, the Acela built by Alstom in Canada. And this is kind of an unusual location. You have to be pretty lucky to get a picture of an Amtrak train here. That's because that's Thomas Viaduct on the B&O, and that's a detouring Amtrak Florida train. I don't know if I knew or got lucky, but in any event, I mean, back then Amtrak would make a much greater effort to keep things moving if they could. Now their attitude is, well, you can't get in trouble if you just cancel it. And there's Union Station on a misty Christmas evening. We're up in New York State now, and that's Aurora Turbo on the Empire line. And here we are just north of the Bear Mountain Bridge. I guess that's a southbound train. It's a great place for pictures, and that big marsh on the left, and on the right across the Hudson is West Point. I forget the name. I don't think that's still that. Anyone remember the name of the location? And here we are at Breakneck Ridge. This is where the Appalachian Trail comes down, crosses the railroad, and I think it goes on down to the Bear Mountain Bridge and crosses to the other side of the Bear Mountain Bridge. But in any event, there's a Aurora Turboliner. This, of course, was one time 4 tracks. I believe this is at Garrison. It's kind of unusual. This is the Windsor Station, Montreal. On the right is the Canadian. On the left is the Adirondack, or the middle of the Adirondack, and the left is a CP Bud car to Ottawa or somewhere, I'm not sure. This picture only could have been taken for about 6 months because the Adirondack used to leave, other than during this one period, used to leave like 8 or 9 in the morning before the Canadian would have been spotted. There's Graham Claytor. This is on the inaugural of the Empire connection to allow the Empire service trains to go into Penn Station. And Claytor wanted it, and Claytor got it. I mean, he wanted the auto train and he got it. I mean, he made things happen when he thought they were important. Now they don't have a president who knows anything. But anyway, he's speaking obviously to the crowd. We're at View Tower, which is right along the Susquehanna, just up there last week. Duncannon is around the corner to the right, and that's the eastbound National Limited. Or at least I think it was. I don't know. It looks like he's got a slumber coach, and I don't remember if the National ever had a slumber coach.
Are you sure that's the phase 3 paint? Are you sure the National Limited ran during phase 3 paint?
Well, no, I'm not. Well, when did the National come off?
79.
It could be it isn't. It could be just a very late running Broadway,
Okay.
because I couldn't get up there that quick. And your comments and the fact that there's a slumber coach there makes me wonder if it isn't the Broadway.
Yeah, the National was part of the massive October
Right.
70 train offs.
Well, what year was it come off? 79?
79.
I started at Amtrak at 75. So,
Great.
but you're a paint scheme expert. I'll go with your projection. I'll change my description of that in the future. You're the first one to catch that in all the ones I've shown.
I photographed the National Limited a lot. It's always had one A unit and a B unit, E8A and an E8B every time I went up there. Then it just left. It's gone.
Well, I'm feel humiliated, but it's okay.
That's okay.
Now we're at Harrisburg, and I know this is definitely the Broadway splitting into the New York and Washington sections. And don't ask me which is which. You know, Alex?
I think the one on the left is going to go down the Port Road,
Right.
not the Port Road, and the other one's going to go
could
to
be.
New York.
Yeah, but that doesn't split out to quite a few miles out. But anyway, you're right. And then if you notice, there's also a bunch of stainless steel cars there. I can only guess those were Clocker cars running in Harrisburg service, because there was no other train.
How'd you get that shot? You just walked down the stairs and took the
Yeah.
shots?
I said, I know Alex Mays.
Yeah, right.
Go right up. If we can.
I've gotten thrown out of there doing that.
Well,
to
this
get the
was what,
shot.
19, well, what would it be, 1980 or 81 or 82? I mean, they didn't do that back then.
Yeah.
And anyway, I mean, if they had, and I'm sure I don't remember that, I would have flashed my pass.
There you go.
But I don't remember having to do that. This is an unusual picture. This is just west of Parksburg. The tracks on the right are the main line to Harrisburg. The tracks on the left are the now defunct Ackland and Susquehanna, the Pennsy Freight line, and you have a jump over at Parksburg for that track that you're on. And then the freight tracks came up the middle. Except this is probably the Washington, it's got to be the Washington section of National Limited, and it doesn't belong here, it belongs over on the Port Road. And it's very possible they were doing track work or something like that. And that's why I was here, and I just happened to be in the right place at the right time.
Or could this be the Pennsylvanian? This is pretty short for the Broadway.
Well, Pennsylvania was never that small. Not the Broadway, it's the Washington section of the National Limited.
Oh, the National. Okay, yeah, that could.
That was only two. Matter of fact, at one point, they didn't have a Washington section. They actually made a stop at North Philadelphia, and they stopped, at least in one direction, a Metroliner. You rode a Metroliner to North Philadelphia, and then you changed to the New York train.
Yeah, there you go.
You'd have to get the Warner Goldberg book out, which I'm sure will tell you when that happened.
Yeah.
This, I believe, that is the Alex Mays National Limited with the B unit and the thing. This is around Cove, Not as big a train, and
It's gonna be in it.
got the B unit.
Yeah, yeah. I never saw one unless it had E in it. It's never.
All right, so now what about that? Is that the national?
Yeah, but you know, Conrail banned those SDP 40s.
Right. So what train is this, Alex?
I don't know, is that Spruce?
He's got, I'm not, no, I don't think it's Spruce. I think it's somewhere just east of Horseshoe Curve. But I don't know exactly where. It's between Altoona and Horseshoe Curve. But
Okay.
I guess the train looks too big to be the national. But the fact it's running with E units is also kind of strange, isn't it?
No, because Conrail,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, but then it ran for years with E units. The shabby looking E units, they must have dug them out of the old, I don't know, the deadlines and got them running again. But
I
they only
guess.
they ran the Lakeshore Limited and the Broadway Limited to about 1980 with E units, and then the F40s were they replaced them with F40s.
Well, we want to take a vote. Do I tell people this is the national or the Broadway?
It's too long to be the national.
All right, we'll call it the Broadway.
This is a holiday.
You guys are a tough audience.
Yeah.
Now, this is probably the same train.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 passenger cars. That's not big enough for the Broadway usually.
No.
Didn't you say the Broadway carried a slumber usually?
Yeah, and I don't see a slumber on this.
Yeah.
So I think it was a national. Maybe Alex can read the car line number in that door.
Let me get my. It's all guesswork, but you know, it sure brings back a lot of fond memories seeing those stainless steel Heritage
Yeah.
3 cars.
And this is the Shenandoah, train 33. One of Harley's trains, Washington, Cincinnati. It was a pretty ride, not much ridership. We tried to, first when we started, we had a fare. You could go Washington to Rollsburg and back for one way plus $1. We were hoping to get joyriders, but we didn't get a whole lot. And then we tried running it overnight to connect to the Cardinal in Cincinnati. And we had the Ampad, which was, they put 2 Superliner economy rooms in one end of one coach. And there was nothing that really could save it. Of course, you couldn't even run the train now because much of the line has been abandoned.
Where'd you shoot that?
I don't know. I'm gonna guess. I was just guessing. Yeah, I would have said somewhere on near the Magnolia Cutoff or something like that.
Yeah. Okay, that's a pooch on the lead, right?
Right. And of course, it's got to be the train left Washington at like 9:30 in the morning, and the sun is clearly in the west already here. So it's certainly west of Martinsburg.
Maybe the Cumberland Narrows?
It could be, I don't think so. Well, it could be.
I don't know.
Could
Really
be.
nice. Really nice.
There's no identification, unfortunately. There's one new tie over here.
Mhm.
And this is another big train. This is Charlottesville. And that is the Newport News section of the
Whitman
James
Gillette.
Whitcomb Riley. Handsome train. And it's interesting though, there's a coach over on the side. Maybe they're just a Protect car or a bad order car. I don't know, whatever.
That Jeep have a steam heater,
It must.
right?
Of course, at this time of year, they didn't need it. Other than for hot water. And here is the whole Cardinal. This is at the C&O station, not the Southern station.
You see the southern in the distance.
Yeah.
Southern station.
And boy, that was an ugly paint scheme. I guess it was clean and all, it might have been that bad, but they didn't take care of them, that's for sure.
So was that the Cardinal or the James Whitcomb Riley?
Well, we renamed the Riley the Cardinal when I was there. Does anyone know why it's called the Cardinal?
Yeah, everybody knows.
Why?
Every state it goes through, the cardinal is the state bird.
You're right. I thought, sure, you would say it was named after Harley Staggers. No, you're entirely right. So, but I suspect this is before it was the Cardinal.
If you, no, it's E7. It's been look- Okay.
All right, Alex, what train is this?
Well, let's see. That's on the RF&P, right? It's
Right.
crossing, I guess, crossing the Powell's Creek.
Well, I don't know about that, but it doesn't matter. I need the train name.
Carolinian.
No, it's a Palmetto.
Palmetto, okay.
That was another Clater special. And he was right. I mean, it had like 84-seat coaches and it was full.
Yeah, we rode it last year. It was a really nice daytime run.
Yeah. And another one of your pooches.
The problem with this Savannah station is out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah,
And you know, you've been there, haven't you?
I have been, but you know what? I've been to the original station. That was when I was a kid, 6 or 7, we went on the East Coast Champion to Florida. And they were still using the old Savannah station, which you had to back into. And it was like 3 in the morning and I couldn't sleep. And I went to the back and the conductor had the door open. He had the monkey hose and he was backing in and there were all these lights out there. And I never forgot that. But then they built the station out on the main line. They did save time. I mean, and there probably was not a great building. I can't remember. I never saw it.
It's in an industrial area. You got to call a cab.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
You know
not the only Amtrak station like that.
You know what the employee nickname for that train is?
Yeah, let's don't say it
The
here.
chicken bone.
Chicken
Yeah,
East.
That's what they called the city of New Orleans.
That is the Chicken Bone West.
it's Southern Crescent. No. Where
This
is
is
this?
the northbound Silver Meteor at West Palm Beach.
Yeah, it's Palm Beach. Yeah.
And we're back in Chicago, but under Amtrak. And that's the South Wind.
Yeah.
Don't ask me what route it was on at this time. I don't know. My guess is it was probably pretty early. So originally it went down the Panhandle to Logansport and then to Louisville. I think it stayed on its original route. But it was all seaboard coastline equipment because as a story recently observed, if anyone's interested, there's a very good the series of articles, but the latest issue of the Seaboard Coastline magazine has a description of all the cars that Amtrak bought from the seaboard and how they were used and how they were disposed. And it's got another article on, which I had forgotten, on Canadian National sleepers, which they leased in the first several years. So it's a very good article. And the previous articles are good too. But anyway, there's Central Station, and that's the South Wind. And there he is looking south, and you see they mostly a seaboard coastline consist. And this is the inside of Central Station. I don't know where, maybe I did this one day at work. You can see, obviously, it's after the start of Amtrak. And I never saw the station the way it originally was. Did not have that low ceiling. That was put in probably in the 40s to make it look more contemporary. And this is the city of New Orleans, but I'm pretty sure, given the date on it, it probably was, I put it in because under the Amtrak, because it's the Amtrak, and they started out with the city of New Orleans. They had that wreck. And then at some point one of the problems was it became more and more difficult to do the dawn to dusk trip on the IC, so they went to the Panama. You see the coach yard on the right. And things are changing. We're back over at Chicago, over the Penn Central, and you can see they've got one of the new SDP 40s, but I suspect the IC unit is in the lead because of the cab signals. And it's also a nice shot. The building in the back, which says Pennsylvania Railroad, was their freight station and was supposedly the largest brick building in the world at one time.
Tore down.
It's now torn down, unfortunately. And another train, this is the James Whitcomb Riley. Coming out of Central Station. And you see you got a CNO, rather GN Dome up front, which my guess is went to Newport News. Couple of UP coaches. New York Central, I think sleeper. Well, I don't know, is there not a car there? Take that back. Maybe one coach, it may be a UP counter diner, and then a New York Central sleeper on the rear.
Yeah, the Newport News train for a while was the world's shortest dome liner. So that,
Right.
you know, second unit in the dome would be the only cars that would go to Newport News.
Right.
Dome car.
Well, they wanted a dome on the train and they couldn't run it to Washington. So short of taking it off at Charlottesville, they had to run it to Newport News.
Right.
And you can see the IC shop building in the back for the commuter cars. And again, there's Soldiers Field on the right. And it looks like they're, what do you call it? The, take that back.
Highliners, you know.
Yeah, highlights. It looks like this, I was gonna say the Sears Tower is, it's a John Hancock that's under construction. I don't know what the other building is. And it's the piggyback train coming off the St. Charles Airline. And there's a sorry looking San Francisco Zephyr. It's not a California Zephyr, San Francisco Zephyr, but that front unit really was sorry state. And you can see the hodgepodge of equipment in the back. And you look at that,
That's the same
that's the St. Charles Airline on the going over on a bridge. You can see the top of the tower of Central Station, and to the left, that tall white building is where Dave Gunn lived.
Did Amtrak never put the train number on the
No.
lead locomotive? Always the locomotive number?
The only a few railroads put the train. The UP did. I'm not sure how that'd be a good story for someone to write.
Seems it'd make
Not
it
many,
easier for the
not many
passengers.
railroads use the train number. I don't. It's a good question. I don't know. That is a job for the NRHS to research.
Yeah.
And this is on the north side of Chicago. Again, this is probably all covered now. And that's one of the early innovations on the Milwaukee, on Amtrak. This is one of the through Milwaukee to St. Louis trains. In fact, I rode on the first day, I rode from Glenview to Joliet, as did several other rail fans. I did not see Alex, which surprised me. But then I didn't know Alex then, so I don't know if I would have recognized.
I was in disguise.
And I always like this one. This is at Lockport. This is the combined LCAP super chief, and he comes off the bridge here, I think, over the canal, and then makes this big sharp. It's sort of misleading. The main line is really in the foreground. He comes off the bridge and makes that big turn. And this is at Carrollton. That's again the combined train. This is where there's a big curve here. This is where the original Santa Fe main line that they built up from Kansas City. They didn't know how they're going to get into Chicago. They bought this rundown, beat up line which ran from Chicago to Peoria. And at Carrollton, they connected the two. And to get them connected, they had to build this big, wide, super. Well, I doubt when it was built, it was super elevated, but it's a wonderful place to take pictures. And here's again the combined train and running with the Santa. You know, I don't know whether the Santa Fe, the original freight version of the F-45s were geared for passenger train speeds, or whether this was engines that were in the war bonnet and then were repainted, but that B unit that's behind them, I suspect, is providing steam heat.
Yeah, these were built for the Super C, the hotshot piggyback train. So they were allowed to go passenger speeds. And
Yeah,
then,
but were they allowed to go 90?
80 at least. I don't know about 90.
But they had to have a, well, I don't know. This, Alex, is west of Fort Madison. This is maybe one of the short sections in Missouri.
Nice shot.
Yeah. I wish I could do that again.
You know, we should do everything you've shown. Oh, Joliet.
Yeah, Joliet was great because, you know, there were lots of trains. You had all the Santa Fe, the GM&O, and the Rock Island ran a fair number of freight trains, that's for sure. And then you also had all those semaphores.
And you wander around, go walk wherever you wanted to walk.
Well, you're right. And the station was still being used. Then they rebuilt the station, and then they decided, in order to avoid the Rock Island trains being interfered with by the BNSF and the CN, they've moved the platform. The Rock Island trains don't go across the diamond anymore. They're on the right behind that tower. And I believe the Amtrak trains board on that side. I'm not really sure about that.
Yes,
that-
the Amtrak train's board at that new station. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a building there?
Yeah, there's a building. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So they rebuilt the old state. I don't know what they use it for, events, I guess, or something like that.
I think so. Yeah. Mhm.
That's the Texas chief. For a while, it always had the former CZ OBS on board. And this is on Edelstein Hill, which is west of, he's coming down the hill, I think. No, take that back. It's the afternoon. It's the west. That's probably the Texas chief. It used to leave around 3 o'clock, I think, or something. But anyway, it's unusual to have the yellow bonnets on there. I'm not a Santa Fe power expert, but you know, I can't trouble keeping straight when they repainted them, when they were repainting for freight, and when for, obviously that had to be a 90-mile-an-hour unit. And you can see the CZ OBS on the rear. And same train, but now we're out at west of Albuquerque at Dalles, not the Dalles, Dalles. Dalles is in Oregon. And, you know, this was one of their premier trains. So you paint guys can tell me that lead engine, oh, are those two SD40s with an F40 on the front, or what is that?
Well, the two engines trailing the lead engines are definitely SDP 40Fs. I can't make out the lead engine. Could be a freight engine.
The
The
lead engine,
engine's an F40.
Okay, so you could probably figure the time phase for this.
it's in phase 2 paint.
So what year does that make?
Well,
How much did they overlap with that paint?
I bet 79.
The F40 started being delivered in late 75, I think.
Yep, November.
Well, you can't prove me. Anyway, nice picture of the trainee. He's on the only trains pretty much that use this line were the passenger trains, because they were coming off of the line through Santa Fe and Las Vegas, and then here they swung around and they joined the freight line, the Southern Transcon, which comes in from Belen. And that's again on the same freight line from a slightly different angle. I don't know if that must be the same train. I can't believe it isn't. This is actually, although you wouldn't think, this is actually a regular Southwest Chief. This was on the way, number 4 on the way back. This is around Wagon Mound. There's a big S curve out there. And we had upgraded the Southwest Chief, and we did display trains all the way, finishing up in LA. And we had an open house, and we had an Indian tribal dancer, and we had all that. And this was bringing back the display equipment, which I don't know, it's probably the rear equipment on the regular train. So you very rarely would see 2 Superliner lounges on the same train. And one thing you would never see like this train is a train that clean.
Yeah.
Mendota.
Yeah.
Well, the Northwestern isn't go through Mendota. Well, that's because this is the Galesburg train, which ran for a while with the least, not Galesburg, Quincy train, ran with the least intercity bi-level equipment. I wish it were a little sharper, but that's the Milwaukee road crossing the Burlington there. Again, the tower, I think, is gone, and I'm sure it's gone. We're up here, we're near Columbus, Wisconsin, and there are no sleepers on that train. So I believe, I'm almost sure, this was the Hiawatha. Hiawatha, I think, ran daily to St. Paul and 3 days a week out across Montana, I think. I can look it up in the book, I just haven't done it. And I believe that this is one of the short days. And if you look in the back, you can see one of the last wigwag signals just near the rear car to the right. In fact, I have a picture of him, a friend of mine, doing a wigwag.
Yeah, wigwags were a trademark in Wisconsin, but they're all gone now.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know that. And yeah, this is probably, the car on the rear is an XGN car that ran on the rear of the International between Seattle and Vancouver.
Yeah, this is definitely the Hiawatha that ran with
Right.
that car.
Yeah, that's a short train. That's typical Milwaukee track with that Chatz ballast. That's one thing that's changed with the CP. It's all crushed rock now. And my guess is, given the power, this is probably at Columbus, and this is probably the Empire Builder.
Yeah, Empire Builder had generally had the F unit. You see the ABB F
Right.
unit.
Right. And here's the Dubuque train, the Blackhawk. He's crossing the sewage canal or the Illinois River, whatever you call it, kind of an inbound trip. And here's another day. I've been asked what those abutments for. This is probably on the west side of Chicago. I don't know if that's the Chicago Roar and East and Elgin, or whether it's possible some kind of stormwater gate that closed. It doesn't look like that, but it doesn't look wide enough to be a railroad bridge. I mean, if anybody's got any ideas.
I mean, it looks like there's floodgates like that in Ohio and some flood-prone areas.
Well, then it probably is a floodgate.
Although it
How do you
doesn't
fill it in?
it doesn't look like they line up evenly.
No.
I think they're probably abutments, maybe for an interurban.
Well, that's what I thought. Maybe the Chicago Roar and Elgin. And I can look at the open railway map and see if I can, it'll be on that map, see if I can figure it out. And this is St. Louis Union Terminal. That's a Milwaukee train or a Chicago train. Unfortunately, well, I mean, the station's still there and there are private cars there, and the new station isn't bad as a new station.
That is incredibly well lit for the people.
Let's see, go back. Yes, it is. Oops, sorry. I mean, it's, well, you remember, I'm probably at the north end of the shed. And the light is coming from my back, you know, very near to, I don't know how much longer the shed would be. I mean, you can see the train is not as well lit as the nose. But you're right, it's stunning the way it came out. And I take no credit other than, you know, just trying to take the right exposure. And this is the National Limited, I know it is, coming out of St. Louis, headed for, I believe, Kansas City. I'm sure for Kansas City. And you might look at that and say, well, there it is, one of the GMO trains overtaking a freight. Not. If you look at the train, you can see carefully it's stainless steel, which the freight train is GM&O, but the passenger train is Amtrak. This is down along, you know, Route 66 or whatever the expressway is.
And G&O Power would run into Milwaukee when they had the Milwaukee to St. Louis trains. So
Right.
growing up in Wisconsin, that was a treat to see G&O E7s in Wisconsin.
Michigan City. That's the drawbridge there. That's an RTG turbo, the original one. I don't know if the drawbridge is still active or not. I can see the guy up in the cabin. And this is Hammond, and this is the James Whitcomb Riley. I guess I should have waited until the train was closer. I don't know why I didn't, but it certainly got plenty of semaphores.
What's that structure overhead?
That's the bridge. I guess it was a swing bridge, is my guess.
They ran that phase 2 paint scheme on E units on the Lakeshore Limited in the summer of '79.
Yeah. Well, this wasn't the Lakeshore. They went.
Right,
They going
right.
in the,
I'm just saying, to date that was when they had to pull the E units back out of storage to replace the
right.
SDPs. That's the way they were painted in the summer of '79.
And it's still relatively clean, so you're probably right.
Well, I stood on Roosevelt Road and I saw a match ABBA set of those clean E units. I tried for a long time before that, and I was amazed how easy it was to get those shots out there and match set and clean power.
Here's that other. So this is in North Judson. The railroad is all but gone now. I think there is a short line, and the town owns a few miles of track they run tourist trains on. But
Yeah,
North Judson used to be a good place because you had the Panhandle, and you had the Erie, and you had the C&O all there. And now there's nothing.
There's an active museum operation out of there.
Yeah.
The nickel plate 765 runs out of there.
Yeah, that's
You
That's
sure
single-
about that?
Huh?
They just made a deal with there's I could send it to you, but you could look it up for the Friends of
Yeah,
not the Friends, the Fort Wayne Historical. They got a deal with a short line that's in eastern Indiana and also goes up to Michigan.
Yep.
I don't think it's this track.
no, but they have run out of North
Oh,
Judson.
yeah, I would.
It's an all-day run. I mean, ride up one way and chase back with John Bean, maybe.
Again, we're on the Panhandle. It's an awfully short train. Well, it could be the Hilltopper, no? Probably one sleeper, two coaches, and a diner. Actually, for the Panhandle, the track looks pretty darn good.
So you're talking about the line from Mingo Junction through Columbus, right?
No, the Panhandle was the one that went Chicago, North Judson, Logansport, down to Columbus. And also, I guess the line down to Louisville was considered part of the Panhandle, but I do know the Panhandle was considered the line out of Chicago through C&O down to Logansport and Columbus.
Okay, if you're from Ohio, you know the Panhandle as being, well, it was part of Jerry Jacobson's Ohio Central. It was
Right. Well, you can look
Columbus.
up the Pennsy. I think you'd find, well, that's on the Pennsy that the Panhandle was. I mean, that line was very busy at one time. First of all, you had trains to Cincinnati, Louisville, Columbus, and then a lot of the perishable traffic in the 40s and 30s went via that way to avoid all the passenger trains going through Fort Wayne. So it was a pretty heavy density main line. Does anybody know where this is? No. Superior. That's the Arrowhead. I think when the train first started, it came out of Superior, and then they extended it to Duluth. I'm not quite sure what, but Duluth is right around the corner from here.
Yeah, I wrote it to Superior, so this be mid-70s.
And we're in Denver Union Station, and you can see on the top the sign says the San Francisco Zephyr, not the California Zephyr. And what time did he get in? The Chicago to Gales, where it says 11:40 a.m. from, I can't believe that it wasn't due. Well, it was due at 11:40 a.m. I don't know. Could that have been? But of course, at that point, it was going via the UP, so it was much faster. Oh, what a terrible picture. I should drop this out. This is the California Zephyr at Sacramento. I played around with this one too many times.
It looks fine.
Uh,
And a few units.
Well, there's better. We're up at Norden at the top of Donner Pass. I don't know if anybody's going to the convention in Reno in a month. They're going to run a trip up here. But you can see the snow shed in the back. And not only were the tracks under the snow shed, there was a turntable under the snow shed. And the operations offices and residences were all under the snow shed, connected by covered passages because there was so much snow up there. And that's the eastbound San Francisco Zephyr. And here we are with the only domes that the SP would ever allow, their own. You see a little more of the show. This bracing on the top, I think, braced the roof over the turntable because it couldn't be supported. And here we are at different trip, obviously, at Sparks. And there's one of the SP domes, but not repainted. And an original California Zephyr diner, a Silver Cafe. And we're up in Montana. Here's the Empire Builder. Pretty good looking train. A few different paint schemes. There he goes.
Wow.
It's one of the NP Dome sleepers, or as it was at the end, called Cocktails in the Sky. They got rid of the round end observation, and they put tables up in the dome, and they served drinks there so they could get rid of the lounge. And this is the eastbound Empire Builder in Glacier Park at, what do they call it? It is a place, it's False Summit, I think it's called, because it's not really the summit, but it, in any event, there's the Empire Builder was the first train to get superliners. And here we are at Glacier Park. Station's still there, I'm glad to say. And here we come, just east of Glacier Park. You come out of the mountains, and almost immediately you're in the rolling plains. As a matter of fact, you're almost, you may very well be on the Blackfeet Indian Reservation, and US 2 though is right there.
Isn't that Canada in the distance?
No, that's
No?
Glacier National Park. Canada, you'd have to take a right turn and go about 50 or 60 miles. You're near the Canadian border, but you're not, that's not Canada. That's Glacier National Park. And here's the builder at Cutbank. Great location. I actually got several pictures here. If you, I don't know, can you see my arrow or not? No?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
arrow, where the arrow is,
Yes.
that's the railroad, comes through a cut, comes down here, swings around, and you can see the mountains in the distance. That's Glacier Park, about 40 or 50 miles to the west. And this picture came out well, but I took a bunch of others with a telephoto, and it just got the focus, unfortunately, totally verblungered, as my father would say. But even this is pretty good.
Yeah. So you chased that train?
Well, I don't know how far I chased. Wait a minute, hold on. Oops, I want to go backwards. I may have chased it from Glacier Park, but I didn't chase it, you know, all the way across Montana. I could have kept up with it, I don't think. This is on the North Coast Limited. And I don't know what river it is, but the North Coast Hiawatha, on the route of the North Coast Limited, which only ran, what, a few years, and there's an active group trying to bring it back, which would be nice. And here he is. The question is, I'm not sure what station that is, but you can see he's got the F40s, but he's got a steam generator car because they don't have any steam boiler.
I believe the Hiawatha was one of the 1979 train offs, right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Let's see, well, obviously this was when I was riding it, and this was when my wife and I went to Alaska. What time of year were the 79 train offs? In the fall?
Fall time change.
I think this may be the summer of 79.
Okay.
Might be Butte, I'm not sure. You can see mountains anyway.
Yeah, no, it's, well, anything's possible. And that needs to be tampered with. And this is, there's some clean looking E units. I believe this is at Portland Union Station. Probably for the Starlight. And this is, of course, more recently. It really doesn't fall in the 10-year plan, but that's the Schuylkill River, and you can see one of the Metroliner cars on the back as a cab car. And then just to go beyond the point and arrow, we're back in Denver, and of course, here's the lamented Rio Grande Zephyr. And wonderful train.
Those were number 17 and 18. Did Amtrak have any number 17 and 18 trains?
It's a good question. They did at one time. Wasn't the Hiawatha 17 and 18 at one time? I guess they didn't, there was no through cars. They didn't have to worry about it. And here he is going up the, going around the curve there at was it Coal Creek?
Yeah, approaching Tunnel 1.
Yeah, I never could get the color right on this one.
Can you go back to the previous slide? You didn't have any commentary.
Oh, wait, sure, hold on. Well, Alex, what makes you think I'd have commentary in every picture?
Well, I don't know. you
This
can
is
make-
this is coming up from Denver. That's the Big Ten in the back, you know, where the railroad makes the big S curve.
Yeah,
The hopper cars that are now permanently fixed.
yeah, windbreaker.
And if straight ahead, he'll make a curve to the left and then a curve back to the right over the road and go up the side of the mountain to Pine Cliff.
That's nice.
Yeah, a little out of focus. Sometimes you have.
We can go back and reshoot it.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I may go back there in May when I come back. I'm going to get off the train in Denver and rent a car for a few hours before I fly. So that may be it. I rather like this one. I
Yeah,
think it's Gore Canyon.
Yep.
It's interesting. You look closely. There's someone in the vestibule of every car.
yeah, wonder why.
Yeah, you think you could do that today?
Yeah, look sneaky, don't hang out there. There's obviously been some flooding up in that area. Look at the river.
This is in the Wasatch. This may be on Soldier Summit. This again, that's the Wasatch, probably getting close to Helper. And there's the Rio Grande station, which is still there. I'm not sure what it's being used as right now. And this is a sad picture if you look at that sign.
Yeah,
And here's one of the, that's more like it's either the Peoria train, if it's it isn't the Big Ben, which went to, so it's probably a Peoria train. They're nice little trains. The other thing, I don't know if most of you were aware of, when they cut back their passenger operations, they had all these guys they were paying. So they put a diner in LaSalle Street Station and they ran a restaurant using the dining car employees they had to pay anyway. What was it? It was track 6 or track 9 or something like that. Here's now that's the Davenport train, because you can see the Big Ben on the rear. It's kind of unusual. I don't know why they needed 2 engines. And we're down in Mr. Clater's land.
oh, look out. I don't like the back space. I didn't like the back. I didn't like the black. I did read a lot better.
And here is the Crescent again.
Yeah, that engine of the restoration.
And I just was here about 2-3 weeks ago. Actually, not literally here, but we're on Turn Again Arm on the Whittier shuttle.
Yep.
You can tell that's an old sign. You know how?
It's not Mount McKinley anymore.
That's right.
Denali, right?
Yep,
Right.
probably.
And here we're going over Hurricane Gulch.
Yeah, that's right.
The cars have all been replaced by cars built in Korea, which are fairly nice. I'm not sure if they've kept some of the old domes or not. I thought they had, but I'm not sure. And here's the station isn't there anymore. It's a series of wooden shelter and one station, but it's also, this is the GP40s or whatever. The passenger trains are pulled by these SD70 Max, which I think look in their paint scheme look just great.
Yep.
And this is Anchorage. This is this I think is near Hurricane Gulch. When I was there, they didn't have any equipment detectors, so they periodically did a roll by. You know, they'd stop, they firemen would get down and stand on the side, and they pull the train back by him, and he'd go the other side, and then they roll back, and then they go. They don't do that anymore.
Why is there a DOT emblem on the nose?
Because the railroad was owned by the US DOT until 10, 15 years ago or 20 years ago. I don't know. I was up there because the acting general manager wanted to unload the passenger service on Amtrak. So 3 of us went up there to do an inspection trip. And I can remember being in the Tanana River Gorge up in the cab with this other guy, Jim Larson. And he looked at me and he said, I can't believe we're getting paid to do this. When I agreed. But so it was owned by the DOT. Thank God now it's owned by the state. I mean, you would never, if Amtrak had taken over, you never would have what you have now, because they have some interest in building tourism and whatever. Amtrak, the narrower, if it isn't the Northeast corridor, if the state doesn't do it, they're not going to do it. So.
No domes.
No, this was in the summer. This was in the winter, and the train at that time ran only 1 day a week in each direction. It was a mixed. You can see the cars on the end. They now they run 1 day a week each direction after the tour season, and then starting in January, February, March, they go up to 3 days each direction because apparently there's enough winter tourism. And when I was up there, I could only ride the train one way because the other way was all sold out. We think there were people coming to see the Northern Lights. But you'd never have that under Amtrak. So anyway, and last but not least, today's Amtrak or today's, not to be the future, the Acela up east of west of Old Saybrook. If no one's ever gone up there, it's a wonderful place for pictures because there's a parallel road to the railroad, and there's a bike path there which used to be a trolley line, so you can get some really nice pictures there. Not a lot of variety, but nice pictures. So that is the end.
Very good show.
Yeah, let's have a hand fire. That was a terrific show.
Yes.
Thank
very
you.
much.
My pleasure.